necessarily one of surprise because as the events unfolded last night and early this morning, more and more elements were coming out that this could point indeed towards a terrorism attack. However, it's been proven in the past that we need to be cautious when such elements come out, and we need to let the investigators do their job. But I wasn't necessarily surprised when that came out.
Yeah, there are several French media reporting that the wife told police her husband, who was deaf, had made visions and made incoherent statements during the night before the attack. Of course, this is hearsay at this point.
Absolutely, and right now that's the biggest issue especially when we're outside of the investigative bubble, is to try to make sense of anything. Any element that comes out and try to turn it into a logical timeline or to a possible sign that something was about to go wrong. And that's a huge problem because we often tend to see signs or a level of relevance that isn't necessarily there for something that could have been very trivial.
Colleagues said that he had words in the past or had problems in the past with his superior at the office. There could, of course, be more than one motive for the attack.
Absolutely. That's not unheard of with terrorist attacks. If that is indeed the case, is that the motivations are actually multiple. One can act as a trigger. Then it fits into a larger rhetoric or a larger logic that leads to the planning of the attack. So it's not necessarily one motive. It's usually a combination of various factors that lead to the attack with a framing that's usually political.
And just to recap again, the fact that the anti-terror unit has taken on the investigation, what does it mean?
Well, it means a lot. That's usually that the elements are there strongly pointing towards terrorism. I think in this case, it's not just the fact that the anti-terrorism unit has taken over, but rather that it's taken over later on in the stages of the investigation. Last night, it was ready to stand to help out, but it wasn't necessarily taking over the investigation. Now that it's doing so, roughly 24 hours later, says a lot. That means there are enough elements present within the investigation to suggest that it could indeed be terrorism.
That it could indeed be terrorism. And we have, of course, seen this before in France with people who up to then had never been flagged as radicalized.
Yes, it's become extremely difficult because we're often looking for signs that aren't necessarily updated. That means we're looking for a pattern of behavior that isn't necessarily suitable to what events over the last few years have demonstrated in terms of behavioral patterns. We're also looking for organizations as a whole that could radicalize someone, whereas in the digital age, anyone having access to the internet can find people that are like-minded, that share common visions, and that can be anywhere around the world. So we're very often the early warning signs that we're looking for aren't necessarily adapted to the context in which we live in.
And at this point in time, again, once again, it's been handed over to the anti-terror magistrates, and in light of fresh evidence which has not been brought forth to the public. The age of the suspect, 45. What does that tell you?
Well, it confirms again that the classic profile, the one that we've developed over, I would say, the last 6-7 years of roughly 18 to 25, which it's a big part of terrorists worldwide are within that age bracket. But we've seen in England, people as an attacker in his 50s, in his 60s. So to find out that terrorists or attackers could be considered to be middle-aged men or middle-aged adults is no longer a surprise. And it shows again that the profile needs to be adapted, that we're no longer necessarily talking about vulnerable youth, but people as a whole that find whatever ideology appealing and are willing to act on it.